Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. It being Friday, we have a Khyber Shards Answers, and surprising no one who's watched recent episodes, we are joined by Eric.
Who, me?
Hey, buddy.
Hello. I just have to say, now that we're on the other side of that storyline, I am much more calm and relaxed, and
I bet. That was a really stressful recording session.
Uh-huh.
The whole one with Sharn and the escape attempt and everything was very, very stressful.
Yeah, just a skosh.
We obviously have lots of questions. So, the beginning comes from Mia. Mia asks, did you, the player, actually want to escape from the gang? Did you have any ideas on what that might have looked like if you succeeded?
I'll start at the end with the second question of what that would have looked like is I hand Ari's character sheet to Philip and I roll up a new character if Ari gets away. And Philip has a very well-entrenched villain for the rest of the campaign to potentially be redeemed down the road. But did I want... No, I did not want Ari to escape. I was okay with Ari escaping, and I was going to play Ari as though Ari wanted to escape. I guess is the best way I can explain it. I wasn't disappointed that they prevented Ari from getting away. I tend to want to do whatever is going to tell the most interesting story, and I figured Ari getting away would have been a very interesting story, or what we're going to have moving forward will also be a very interesting story, hopefully. So that's always my driving motivation. But yeah, there was part of me from a storytelling standpoint that thought, how compelling would it be? Shade carries around all of this guilt about what happened to Ari and Ezri because they went for her to Thalanis and all this stuff. And so having another character to juxtapose that lingering guilt in the form of Ezri, if Ari was just totally lost to the party because they went with him on his personal quest, what would that have looked like? So that would have been interesting, and I'm sad we won't get that. But I like Ari, and I enjoy playing Ari. So,
RA actually asked basically the same question, but to both of us, do you wish Ari had gotten away? From my side, I had spent a good bit of time. So our recording, if you're not someone who pays attention to when we change clothes, broke. We ended a session of recording with Ari turning into a bat.
yeah.
And then we had a couple of weeks before we recorded again with the actual attempt to recover Ari. And I had essentially built out some pretty strict guidelines for how this was going to proceed in terms of trying to get Ari back. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the first part, which I had shared with the players, was everyone's got one turn to do something to prevent Ari from getting away clean. And obviously they prevented Ari from getting away clean, and it turned into a standard, well, not standard, but a combat encounter.
Yeah.
And that was by far the easiest for me, the Dungeon Master, to manage in a lot of ways, because this was a weird one. I don't think I've ever had an entire episode where I just don't play any characters.
You were truly a referee in that session.
Yeah. And that was in the sense of my usual stress is creating and improvising. This was more, I want this to be fun, but also fair. And I don't usually worry as much about fair because it's usually me and the players on two sides of a combat encounter. And so I'm not so worried about fair. I'm much more worried about fun. But with players on both sides, you want to be a little more strictly fair. And so that was difficult. But anyway, so that was one possible outcome, and that's obviously what happened. Had they failed to catch Ari, then I was going to move it into a skill challenge, and they would have one day. They would have that day to find Ari, because obviously it was imperative that Ari get to ground, that he gets somewhere out of the sun that he can rest. And so that would have been, Ari gets away, and Eric is not playing Ari now. Ari is an objective out in Sharn. And then it would become a skill challenge, where they would have a certain number of roles in which to find Ari. And I had a few different ways, and Eric and I had kind of discussed this possibility of Eric playing a member of Dane's group in the city, who had some sort of ability that would make it easier. I was thinking like something like he can scent out a creature by its blood or something interesting like that. Being there to try and help. And so that would be a path for that. If they failed to find Ari in that day, then Ari is done for the time being. Ari becomes an NPC under my control, because we're talking about a vampire. Once night falls, he can turn into a bat and just go. And you can't track a bat in the countryside.
Well, and because I messaged Philip in the downtime during those 2 recording sessions, because I was just looking at Ari's character sheet and thinking about the next session. And this I think speaks to the fact that I didn't necessarily want Ari to get away, but I just wanted it to be a fun session for everyone. But I looked at like Ari's abilities, because not only do you have a vampire who is tailor-made to manipulate people into doing what they want. So if Ari just gets to ground, he can find somewhere to lay low pretty easily. If not, he can force it with the multitudes of charm that he has. And so I was just looking at that, and message Philip was like, okay, so... And once again, there was a tweak or a clarification with the rules, because in my mind it was like, okay, he can cast darkness, so that blocks... magical darkness would block sunlight in my brain, so that's no longer an issue. And so like I just went down this rabbit hole of, oh god, how do they catch Ari? Philip and I had a little discussion about the best way to approach the whole situation.
I mean there were a whole lot of things that I needed to consider that you wouldn't normally in this situation when you've got a player character turning into a vampire. And I would say this would probably apply to a werewolf or any kind of situation where you have a player character still under a player's control who has kind of turned into what in D&D terms is a monster. You suddenly have a whole bunch of issues. So I just had to sit there and think through what is the intention of the limitations on a vampire and all this stuff. Because, and the reason I ruled that the sun is out and that's bad for you, regardless of whether you're in direct sunlight or not, the reason I ruled that is because I was thinking about it, like, otherwise, why doesn't Sharn have a gigantic vampire population? Like, why isn't the entire lower level of Sharn, where there's no direct sunlight ever, just infested with vampires? Sharn would be the ideal location for a vampire if direct sunlight is the clue. So my thought was essentially, you're a vampire, you have to rest because the sun's out.
For those of you that don't know, I run a campaign for Philip set in Sharn, so I'm taking some notes real quick about vampire problems.
I imagine kind of like in... Eric and I have played in a game in Eberron where a character became a lycanthrope. Yeah. Eberron has 13 moons. So the odds of a full moon are a lot more than they are in a game set on Earth.
Yep.
And so, one of the things you would have to consider in an Eberron game there is which moon.
Yep.
All the moons? Is that why lycanthropy is so terribly feared in Eberron? Because it's just constantly a problem? Or is it the moon you were bitten under, one of the moons with its planar attack? Like, there's all sorts of ways you could rule it. But it's one of those things where suddenly this thing becomes into sharp relief, because it can't just be, well, whatever the story I'm telling right now demands, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
If it's a monster werewolf, whereas if it's a player werewolf, it's a whole other thing. So yeah, it was a lot of rules adjudicating that you don't usually have to worry about as a DM in this kind of situation, which was an interesting challenge.
I think having that couple weeks in between the sessions really, I can't even imagine what it would have looked like if you had to make those calls on the fly.
No, I'm very glad that I had the sessions. I mean, I realized that in the end, the most simple form of the session is what occurred, but yeah, it was definitely good to be able to sit down and think through, okay, what if this, what if that, given the chaos of the situation. To more directly answer Ari's question, no, I don't wish Ari had gotten away, but I had thought through the consequences of it, so it wasn't too much of a panic sort of thing. Emily asks, Eric, had Ari become an NPC while a vampire, were there any ideas or mechanics you wanted to explore for your backup PC? And then there's this question, or do you not think about the backup PC? But that's just hilarious.
Warforged Rune Knight. No, that's been a combo that I've really wanted to do for a while. But also, I did take some time and built out Kara as a full PC as a Phantom Rogue, which I think is really fun for an Irani elf. Because the Phantom Rogue is all about communications with ghosts and stuff. So, thought that would be really fun.
Be a really cool paranormal investigator.
Yeah. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have done the Warforged Rune Knight because when you're creating a replacement PC into an existing party, you don't want to step on anyone's flavor too much that's already there. And I feel like creating a Rune Knight fighter would be too adjacent to Pog and what Colin's trying to do with Pog. From a flavor standpoint, I'm sure I could have done something different, but I was probably looking at going with either a rogue type character, a Gith, like half martial, half caster, kind of what Ari is now, or going full wizard. Just, saying, you know what, I'm just going to get weird with it, and make a wizard. So, those were kind of the ideas floating in my head.
Just a full caster?
Mm-mm.
I haven't either. I was trying to think. Yeah.
But I like the idea of a wizard, especially in a setting like Stormreach, because, you have the spell book, you copy spells, and so there's some really interesting stuff you can do there. But then also
with all the ruins and everything, it'd be fun to find a lot of ancient spells.
And the other reason I wouldn't have done the Warforged Rune Knight is because Forge is special in that Forge is a Warforged with an aberrant mark, and I feel like creating another one would lessen Forge's impact in the world. So that was also something I thought about when I was thinking about characters. That would, I'm sure Philip wouldn't have said no, but it would have lessened Forge's impact on the campaign as a whole. So, yeah.
Yeah. Emily would also like to know your favorite vampire media.
Oh, sorry, real quick, to answer Emily's second question, I don't think about backup PCs until it's necessary to. I hadn't really, the Warforged Rune Knight came about because I do subclass deep dives for the Geek Pantheon YouTube channel, and so when I covered the Rune Knight, I was like, oh, this would be so cool. But I don't really build out characters and just have them sitting around ready to go. Anyway, favorite vampire media, the academic wants to be like Dracula or something respectable, but the True Blood TV show on HBO was really fun and stupid, and I enjoyed it a lot. The early seasons, once you hit season 6 and Bill becomes a blood god, then it was less fun, but yeah, I enjoy the schlocky True Blood, Vampire Diaries, that kind of supernatural media for one very specific reason, in that it's the silly fun that you get with something like Fast and the Furious. You don't have to take it too seriously. If you like get distracted for 5 minutes while you're watching it and come back, you're not going to have missed anything huge. Mostly because the music gets super loud when something important is happening, so it'll draw your attention when when you need to be paying attention. But you also, it's this weird Venn diagram of like schlocky, fun, disposable storytelling mixed with very deep and complex lore. You can go as deep as you want within the lore in terms of the different vampire organizations and the werewolves and werepanthers and like all the and the fairies and you can do you have all of the deep lore, and so I like that that combination, I guess, for lack of a way to put it. So yeah, that's my answer. What's your very respectable answer, Philip?
I think when I think I had this question before, and it was I think I said What We Do in the Shadows.
Right.
So not at all respectable. Darren asks both of us, any regrets?
Nah, no. Honestly, no. It played out in a really fun way. Yeah, like, because I could have taken Ari like full evil, like made him like alignment change. But that seemed less. The two extremes seemed the least interesting. Of Ari just fully goes full evil, does not care about the rest of the party, and just wants to abandon them to get to Farlman. The other option of Ari still being Ari and wanting to fight against the sword and like dropping constant hints to let them know, hey, it's not me, also didn't seem that interesting. Right. And Eric, the player, doing the same thing also seemed less interesting, because something that I think we kind of alluded to in the recordings, but like I was playing One Night Werewolf while everyone else was playing D&D. Like I was doing my best to like lie, cheat, and steal my way to the zombie island. I lied about my notes. I like lied about stuff that had happened earlier in sessions. So I got very meta with my deception, and my fellow players thankfully seem to all take it in stride, because I know that there is a world where you could say that is not okay, but I thought it was fun. So no regrets.
My only regret is that it was some days later during a watch party that I realized that the sword shop that Pog walked into should have been run by Gerald Goodblade. Because that would have been just very funny. Especially because it would have just been really funny to have him in a slightly different outfit. Like he's adjusted the persona ever so slightly. And make it be Nigel's Nice Knives or something ridiculous like that. Like that just would have been a lot of fun, and I'm sorry that I missed that opportunity in the moment. But that's as far as the vampire thing. No particular regrets. It all turned out fine, and I think it will make a good story going forward. Emily would like to know our favorite district of Sharn.
I mean, my answer is going to be a little biased towards Lower Memphis Plateau, just because I'm so familiar with it, thanks to Eberron Renewed, our actual play set in Sharn, because that's where the base of operations for the party is Lower Memphis. And so a lot of my affection for it isn't in the Sharn City of Towers source book, but I do enjoy it. So
I was going to say basically the same thing, but I think it's like it's such a good place to pick for a Sharn based campaign, because you're adventurers, you don't have any business living in the upper city, and it's the entertainment district. It's got theaters, and university students come down to hang out in the bars. Like, there's just a lot to recommend it, especially as a starting location for a campaign. So I'm in the same basic boat. It's a good space for adventurers starting out. It's got lots of interesting NPCs roving around it, even just in the Sharn source book. So I would also say lower Menthis. Nathan asks, did you consider using your Misty Step spell when Ezri attacked you? Did you decide you didn't want to Misty Step into thin air? Did you think that the spell was outside of what you had readied it for? Or was there any other reason?
So I had a realization partway through the encounter, and I can't remember what of the slog that was that recording Philip left and cut, because there was a lot of rules clarification and talking through rules and stuff in that session. But I realized that I've used Quicken so much as part of my meta magic that I forgot the other one that I had, which was Subtle Spell, where I can not need verbal or somatic components to cast a spell. I didn't realize that until I was back on the boat and I was Ari again. Or no, it was right before I changed out of bat form. So it wasn't Misty Step, it was Thunder Step. I still had 1 3rd level spell slot left because I hadn't cast Shadow of Moil, or 4th level spell slot now. They've leveled up. And so I was like, I could Thunder Step away right now because it doesn't have any material components. It's only verbal somatic. So I can use Subtle Spell to get around that as a bat. It would damage everybody, and then I would be 90 feet away. Which at that point, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. But at that point in the encounter, I was like 3 or 4 exhaustion levels deep. And it was, if I hit exhaustion level 5, where I think 5 is where your speed drops to 0. If that hits 0 while you're in the air, you just fall. And so that was the mental arithmetic I did so to answer your exact question, I did not consider that because I believe Misty Step has a verbal or somatic component, in which case neither of those are applicable when you are a bat. So Ari changing into human form and then teleporting into thin air wouldn't have worked because while in sunlight, he can't change back into a bat. So that was the biggest concern at that point. So, there was a last Hail Mary gambit, but it didn't seem like it would accomplish anything other than Ari just dying. So, and I was trying to play Ari struggling with avoiding harming the party. Like, he tried to bite Ezri at one point while still in bat form. And so in my brain, I was thinking, okay, when Ari's in bat form, it's more attuned to his vampire nature. But when he's back in Ari form, he has a bit more of his mental faculties is what I was trying to play with. And so Thunderstep also would have damaged Shade and Pog. I think at that point were in melee with Ari, which Ari wouldn't have wanted to do. So I thought about a lot of things, Nathan, to answer your question.
And Laura would like to know, has the Forgotten Prince thought about employing Boggles for his thievery needs? I actually think that when they were chasing the Boggle, Eric asked if he knew any stories about Boggles and whether they were connected to particular Archfey, and I'm pretty sure I said yes, but this was before the curse had been revealed, before the Forgotten Prince had come in, and so it wasn't then clarified or expanded on. But yeah, that was the intention. And this was kind of my first little drop in moving us towards Ari's secret story. Was introducing to Boggle. So yeah, I mean, in my Eberron at least, I intend that Boggles are associated with the Forgotten Prince and that he does employ them for thievering. So yeah. And that is our last question. So thank you all so much for the questions. We hope you are still enjoying the absolute insanity that this is, and will continue to check us out. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find links to all of our social media, the Geek Pantheon Patreon, the merch store, all of the things down in the description below. New episodes of Khyber Shards drop every Monday. New Khyber Shards answers every Friday. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.